Okay, this is not Nominee Insight. It's actually, I just don't have an overlay specifically for one thing, Monty. So it looks like Nominee Insight. It's not Nominee Insight. It's the Insight on Esports end of year awards for 2015. And the year has ended. So technically, we were just waiting. That's the real reason why it's late, because I wanted to wait in case an amazing game happened on the 31st. I'm not partisan like that. I'm not just going to dismiss things. I had to wait for the whole year just in case Riot held a secret tournament. I know how they really embrace international tournaments now, so maybe they would. They didn't. So anyway, this show, as all shows, is sponsored by Alpha Draft, blah, blah, blah. But there's only one of them for the year, so I'm not going to do some extended intro about something. I mean, I guess I could just say that this show actually is kind of like my love for transcendentalist philosophy, where it wasn't so much about things that were based in science and the material world. It was about understanding the inner spiritual life of the mind and imagination. And in many ways, I just want to say that that's what I consider our metric or razor for how we decide some of these categories, because it's what we actually experienced as well as watching the game. Because I notice a lot of people, when they pick out player of the year, team of the year, they tend to go purely on results. So they say if someone won something, he has to be team of the year. Or they'll say well, if a series was a 3-2 series, that must be the best series. But I always say, did you actually watch the games, guys?
Yeah, because I know I'm going to be voting for the EU LCS Spring Split Finals of Fnatic versus Unicorns of Love as the series of the year. It was a very close 3-2.
If it was 3-2, has to be, right?
It was such quality.
Exactly. So I got there in the end. So anyway, if you want to exceed, well, first of all, what's great is Alpha Draft is based in the world of stats, etc. But how you get to the conclusion of how to pick people, you don't have to do it by stats. You can do it by stats like all the rest of the birds are, or you can access that inner dimension of imagination and come up with your own team. That's all I'm saying. So Alpha Draft, blah. Right.
So you could be Rick Fox, is what you're saying.
You could just wait till the end of the year and everyone could say, I think all the good players are gone, mate. And he'd go, that all depends, sir, on how you define a good player. I put it to you that I can imagine, here's the thing, Monty, maybe he really is a seer. Maybe he can just look into the future and understand which players are going to blossom into greatness, so maybe. So we've got a million categories here. So we'll go ahead and start off. These are all the same categories as last year, pretty much. And if there's any at the end that we've forgotten, maybe we can add a couple in there. So from what we did last year, same format, which was to make it reasonable, so it's not just Jungle of the Year, someone Korean. Mid of the Year, someone Korean. So it's not just like that. That's why we institute. See, we're like a good version of Riot. Yeah, we're allowing people from the West to feel good about themselves, but we're never quite letting them get out of where they should be. We're keeping them in their place. So what we did was, for teams of the year, we did do the 4 regions. And I'll just say right now, the reason last year, in fact, I might have even said this at the beginning of the last one we did last year, was I was like, the reason there's 4 regions, is there only is 4 regions. I don't care about LMS or anything else like that. But that has changed for this year. Actually, if you look at the whole of the year, LMS was right there with NA, and to a degree EU for a lot of the year. So as a result, it is unfair. Better.
I mean, they got further in international tournaments
than NA,
than NA did, both at MSI and at Worlds.
But we will just say the reason why we're putting this caveat at the beginning is, we don't watch LMS enough, and especially not for the whole year, to be able to do all these categories in LMS. So people who watch LMS, that's just unfortunate. And the difference is, I actually think for next year, since it now warrants being watched, we'll probably be able to do something like this towards the end of next year.
Absolutely. I think that with LMS's performance over the course of this year, it should be much easier to do. But yes, admittedly, we don't want to start giving awards to LMS players that we are not 100% confident about. So.
See, that's an interesting distinction there, isn't it, Monty? If you don't watch the games and you don't really know anything about the players, probably shouldn't just go ahead giving awards out and just giving out expert opinions. Just the way I feel about it, Just the way I feel. I hope everyone else can live by that philosophy. So we'll start out in everyone's favourite region. It's LPL. It's China. So who do you think, Monty, was the Chinese team of the year? I feel like this one's not that difficult.
I mean, it just depends on how you quantify it, right? I think it should be EDG, even though they did have a sort of rough road at the end. and they didn't end up actually coming out as the number 1 seed in China, but they did win MSI. They did actually make it to the quarterfinals at Worlds, and they did win the spring season. So EDG probably should be number 1, and I think for a brief period of time, they probably were the best team in the world in spring. So I think you have to give it to them.
And even the summer when they did fail, the regular part of the summer, they were still fantastic. There's this crazy winning streak in the regular part of the split. So you look at their domestic play, it was pretty phenomenal, except the summer playoffs. I mean, they obviously still went through the regional, did pretty well there. And and actually, even at Worlds, they made it the furthest of any Chinese team. So all in all, I think it's hard to give it to anyone else, especially because, just to say this at the beginning, because people who do rewards shows always seem to not notice this, but a year is actually a 12-month span. I know it feels like a year is what happened from October onwards, that's recent in your memory, but you have to also count a whole year. And technically, there should be no preference given to what happened in the summer over the spring. Now, I know for Worlds qualification, that was a big debate a few years ago, but when you're judging Team of the Year, you don't count whoever won summer as in some way being better than spring. They're actually the same, those two splits. So, to me, EDG should win Chinese Team of the Year. Well, how do you define EDG's style of play, Monty? Weren't they like a team fighting team? Well,
in the spring, they definitely were a team fighting team, and I think that was a lot of their strength because, back in the sort of the Cinder Hulk meta, when we saw those great Sejuani ults from Clear Love and really, really amazing play from Clear Love for a lot of the year, actually, they were definitely a team that would prioritize team fighting and then kind of take early Barons and then push for a victory, and that's pretty much how their victory at MSI came about. So, it really was a lot about teleport usage from the top lane from Koro and the team fighting when they were at their most successful, and they would take a very clean team fight and then take a Baron and then push.
And it's funny that when they signed Deft, despite Deft being a fantastic player, we were kind of like, that doesn't really make sense because he basically had the Chinese version of Deft, Name, but since he is Chinese, he can communicate with your team. But what's funny is, in a way, that's why for most of the year it just worked as well, because Deft really did just slot right in there. It was a team that was based around having the AD carry be a carry late in the game, and it worked out the way it should have done with a good player, right?
I think it worked out for the most part, up until, of course, their losses in the summer playoffs, and then their really disappointing performance at Worlds for a team that was supposed to be maybe a title contender alongside LGD. Were they as disappointing as LGD? No, but they were also in a much easier group, and they did nearly lose to the Bangkok Titans. So they had that problem, and then they got smashed in the quarterfinals. And especially the first game of that quarterfinal that they absolutely should have won, and they had every advantage and every opportunity to win, and they actually had the game served up to them on a silver platter if they knew how to use teleport better.
To me, that game, even the way it was set up, just showed me
that was the most disappointing game of the year.
Man, just honestly, after champ select, just when I saw that lineup, I was like, okay, this team doesn't think they can win. Then why the fuck is the AD carry, who was their star player, playing Jace with teleport?
Well, it was a good strategy, and shockingly, it did work. Like, the thing is that it worked. They had that game won. If they had just teleported into the base and finished the game, they would have won that game, right? 100%. That was 100% victory. People like to argue about this, but no, they won that game. Like, all of the casters that I was with at Worlds agreed that game was 100% won by EDG, and they choked.
You do realize the only reason people argue is because they're like, no, Fnatic was really good in that game and they could have come back. Like, it's that sort of reason, I believe, as to why the pushback happens there.
No, they couldn't have come back. Like, they lost the game.
No, that's my point, is that people use that logic of like, it wasn't a throw. It wasn't. They just fought. The valiant, righteous troops of Fnatic fought their way through Sauron's, the Chinese hordes, barbarians who don't understand strategy, and Lord Delior came back like Gandalf the White, and he led them. He said, "Look to the east, whatever it was, at the dawn for my coming," and he led them back. Found a lost game. That's what a hero he is.
And then they ran into the Ku Tigers and died.
Yeah, in many ways. Which should have been their fate. So that was Chinese Team of the Year, EDG. Runner-up, LGD, presumably.
I don't see any other choice. Had a fantastic... I mean, I really liked the spring finals between LGD and EDG. I thought that was a really good best of five. There were some silly moments in there, but I think it was enjoyable overall. And so we could see that they got second in the spring season and then summer champions. But then again, they also choked at Worlds and IEM San Jose. So the international part was pretty disappointing for LGD on the whole.
One thing I thought was a bit sad about Chinese region this year is in past years I've always bigged up the fact that they used to have an incredible LAN circuit. Outside of just LPL, they'd have all these tournaments. It seemed like this year people didn't give a shit in those tournaments. Like the top teams seemed to fuck around and do stupid roster changes, and those didn't really seem like top level competitions like some of the past ones were.
I would agree with that.
So as a result, like I say, I mean, when you consider two teams, one LPL, who else are you going to give these two spots to at that point in time, you know? So, okay, Korean Team of the Year. Is it tough one? Tough one for you? Over there?
Really
a lot of candidates for this one. So we'll start with CJ, obviously. Jin Air was in the mix there.
I like KT Rolster, personally.
Yeah. I mean, they won a lot of LCKs. So obviously SKT won both LCKs and Worlds and came second at MSI. So I feel like they've probably got this one in the bag.
I think you're probably right there. I think that's probably the easiest one. Spoiler, they're also overall team of the year because there's no competition with them.
Wow, how are you going to spoil that already? I was keeping everyone waiting. You've got to go through all the regions first, before you know who the team of the year is. So what was the style?
It's just super clear. Okay. You know what I mean? That's why you should have always bet on the Koreans, right? There's not really a point to holding tournaments or holding this award show when we already know that SKT is team of the year, is there?
So what was SKT's style of play in 2015?
It actually evolved a lot, and I think because of its evolution, that's one of the reasons why they kept being a strong team. Obviously, Marin is still something like 24-1 on Maokai, and they played around tanks in the top lane a lot of the time during the spring season, as many teams did, but they adapted really well to the Juggernaut carry style of top lane too, come Worlds. So they had the cleanest macro play of any team. They were a very dragon-focused team for a lot of the year, where they would take a lot of fights around dragon, and they kind of prioritized that objective. But also, they played a lot around their solo lanes. So when we talk about Bengi, who actually had a fantastic year, I think he was one of the best players overall in 2015. He, of course, had that more vision-centric style of play, and he focused primarily on getting the solo lanes ahead, so ganking a lot for Faker and Marin while leaving Wolf and Bangs pretty much their own devices in the bottom side. And when it came to the World Championship, I think they just had that meta with a strong top laner and a strong jungle presence in the top lane already in place. So
the runner-up, again, also seems pretty obvious when you consider that Ku Tigers, formerly GE Tigers, finished second in LCK Spring, then they finished third in Summer, and then second at Worlds. So no one can really compare to that sort of average run.
Yeah, even with their very disappointing performance at IEM in Katowice, I still think you have to have them there. And they went on some incredibly impressive win streaks in both spring and summer.
Certainly, especially the spring one's the one that's forgotten. People have to remember when they had the Juggernaut innovation, they were literally only losing the odd game in a best of three, and they were just winning everything.
Also, what's interesting about the Ku Tigers is they probably shaped the meta more than any other team in 2015 because they invented Juggernaut. They had so many different picks that they started using. They invented they brought Victor Mid in. They brought top Malphite in. They did a lot that other teams imitated.
I think they're a pretty clear runner-up for that one. How would you describe their style of play overall? I mean, obviously they began as actually a team that was all late game, pretty much, right? Well,
they kind of stayed that way, actually. We look at a lot of their games, even at the World Championships, where they made it to the finals, and it's funny. I had a lot of conversations with Jat at Worlds, and we both agreed that it's the way they played League of Legends is not the optimal way, and you keep thinking that they're going to fail because their early game was so weak and because Hojin really didn't do anything in the jungle early. Like his ganks would fail and he would fall behind and farm. So he looked pretty terrible at Worlds, honestly. But there's something about the Ku Tiger shot calling and their ability to play from behind that it's just fucking magic, man. it shouldn't work, but it does. And that really defined their style of play, which is get themselves in a pretty bad situation in the early game, fall behind by 5K gold, and then be brilliant at team fighting or get perfect rotations off to secure objectives and make a big comeback.
Yeah, I mean, for a Korean team, they actually remind me a bit in that sense of Cloud9. That's what I always enjoyed watching about their team when they used to... It's like the team that you can never count out of a comeback until you really had killed them.
Yeah,
like the fact
absolutely.
you were a few K up in gold, if you didn't make the next correct decision, if you took the wrong fight and then they could trade for a tower or something, you knew they were going to get back in the game.
Well, Samsung Blue was a lot that way too. So
okay, NA team of the year. See, I feel like this one's pretty obvious actually. Remember, it's the whole year, guys. So you can't just look at the summer.
Yeah, you have to give this to TSM, I think, because they did for a brief period. They did have a very impressive run. Up until MSI, first off, they did very well in the spring season. They won IEM Katowice, so they were looking like perhaps they could actually compete on the international level, and there were a lot of expectations about how well they were going to do coming into MSI. Now, MSI, they decided to have really weird, like, pick priority, where I think that they had completely misread the meta, which was a major contributor to their downfall, and they never really recovered from that point forward, but They had a good 2 or 3 month period in spring where I think they were a world-class team.
And even in the summer, they did get it together and come second in the split.
Yeah.
So even for the slump
time,
period, that's
NA
pretty
as a
good.
region looked pretty terrible, and I think it was far-fetched to say that any team was going to do well at Worlds. In fact, I think NA they overperformed. They did better than my expectations just by actually winning games in the first week.
Yep. Okay, so the funny thing is, when you look at how it worked out, obviously TSM would have qualified regardless, and CLG and TSM very likely would have been the number 1, number 2, but obviously TSM got fucked over by having that second seed in the end, because the way that group came out, they were never going to get out that group.
No, never.
Even beating LGD was a fucking amazing to do that once. I mean, LGD sure helped them out, but...
They did give them Mordekaiser.
They did, so, okay. But here's the thing, TSM fans. Don't think you're burning me when you say TSM beat LGD. If TSM hadn't beat LGD, that wouldn't have brought out Flame. So that victory, it's like, okay, it's one thing if Origin plays really well. Everyone knew they were dangerous. And then if KT Rolster beats LGD, that's fine. But as soon as TSM beat LGD, that's like it awakened the sleeping giant, It's like, okay, bring forth the flame, and then they brought him out with all poles and things holding him in, and then whichever little servant guy had to come and unleash his mask got savagely mauled as he was doing, oh no, drag him away, okay, release him.
What world do you live in where people that are muzzled are brought in on palanquins? Don't you roll those people in on a cart?
Listen, he's a savage. He was held in captivity. That's why they could only use him every now and then.
Flame, the Savage King.
And then obviously they were let's send Dyrus out the right way. In a fucking weird. That's weird. That stretcher looks like a trash can. Yes, it's Dyrus the Grouch. See you, Dyrus. I'll enjoy your vlog. Oh wait, that's right. You have let me down internationally again. Okay, anyway. So on that note, let's go to... Okay, so I assume then for NA runner-up of the year, it's CLG.
Oh god, I guess. I mean, I honestly don't think NA as a region deserves a runner-up, but...
Right, fuck it then. We make the rules, Monty. There is no NA runner-up of the year. In fact, TSM fans should love us even more now, Monty. We've just said, literally, what my joke was in that tweet at the beginning of the year, if you remember. It's essentially, NA was TSM, and then all the rest don't matter, so...
it's true.
That's it, right? TSM only for this show. Remember it, folks. Same TSM channel, same TSM... bashing, I don't know, whatever. I don't remember when we ever did bash them, but we will do as a joke.
Lauding? We're lauding them as the best NA team of the year.
Exactly. Our EU team of the year seems like the most obvious one.
Fnatic.
Yep, Fnatic.
I mean, they won both seasons. They overperformed at MSI to a degree that was, frankly, very startling. especially after their playoff run in EU, where they were doing really terrible drafts and playing like garbage against Unicorns of Love. They showed up at MSI and did extremely well, very surprisingly. And then, made it to semifinals at Worlds, won both seasons. I mean, what do you say here? Great team.
What do you think on the... Oh, I forgot to ask you, what when they were at their best, what was the playing style of TSM?
Of Fnatic?
TSM, I didn't ask for
TSM.
Section, yeah.
Oh, okay, we're going back.
Like when they were at their best in that peak just before MSI, what do you think they were good at?
At that point in time, I think it was a good meta, again, for Dyrus because he could play tanky top laners. I think Bjergsen was playing very well. I think the key to all of their success, though, was really Lustboy, because Lustboy stepped up in that spring season, and he was warding and moving with the team extremely well. And that gave them some really nice vision advantages a lot of the time, and he also had some very good mechanical plays. So I think a lot of it revolved around Lustboy's ability to control the map at the time, and I think it was just a style well suited to the players that they had on that team.
I mean, for me, you can really tell that it was like a mixture of like good vision control and some, for the time, good shot calling. In that the two players who fell off the hardest for me in the summer were the jungler and support. Santorin and Lustboy went from being both pretty good of their positions to both having obvious problems.
Yes, that was actually quite weird. I'm not even sure what happened in that situation. Look, I never thought Santorin was as good as a lot of the NA fans made him out to be, but I thought he was doing pretty well for a rookie player, right? But beyond that, I mean, Lustboy falling off was really weird because I thought he actually played very well and then suddenly didn't.
So now for Fnatic, what was the Fnatic style of play? I mean, admittedly, they had two different lineups, remember? They had the Steelback lineup, and then they had the Reckless lineup.
Right, and Fnatic, a lot of their play was characterized around Huni's teleport use in the laning phase, where they would constantly try and set up TP ganks in the bottom lane for Huni to go to, as well as Huni and Reignover synergy. So a lot of ganking of the top lane by Reignover for Huni, and that was a lot of their play in the spring season. They stabilized a bit more and actually fixed some of their shot calling issues in the summer split, and at that point, Huni was certainly playing some carry top laners, but a lot of it was around Febvin and his ability to scale with Azir and Victor, because Huni was drawing so many bans at that point in time that basically Fnatic got some of the most powerful mid laners almost every game. So a lot of Azir and Victor team play, and Febvin kind of growing into his own as a carry.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting part of the dynamic, I thought. That's why I've always stressed that for most of the year, the game was based around Huni, because this is one of the reasons why people often seem to get confused when I rank like all-time great players, as to why I kind of like take away credit from people who were like the secondary star to a main star. Because the difference is, when you are the main star, I always make this point, even aside from being focused in teamfights, blah, 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 just in champ select, you're being focused. People are trying to take away your champ. So if you're the second star, you kind of get like a little slipstream to go in just behind that guy and get your champs that you want, and then potentially you can be the secondary carry in that particular sense. So that's why you always have to check when a guy's tested in that particular sense. So yeah, obviously Fnatic, here's the thing, when you consider how Worlds went for the whole year, yeah, Fnatic was much better than we've seen any Western team for quite a long time. Admittedly, China did them a favour at Worlds, but that's not Fnatic's fault. All they can do is play the teams that turn up and actually are good. So certainly one of the best Western teams we've ever had, I think. Fnatic 2015 overall. Yeah,
fantastic team. I know Fnatic fans will somehow turn my words into some sort of weird insult at Fnatic, but for a Western team to go to the quarterfinals or the semifinals at Worlds is a very big accomplishment, especially considering the field in China was expected to be stronger than they were. Fnatic showed up. They had an amazing summer season. They put together a very good roster. They developed their talent well. They developed their rookie players very well. I mean, look at Huni and Febvin. They're two of the standout players in the LCS regions in 2015. So, great team.
No, I mean, in that sense, Fnatic fans really have become the TSM fans of Europe.
They're idiots. Like, I don't even know what to say.
You can't even compliment
them. You can't even compliment them without you thinking they're being insulted.
here's the thing. It's if you say a thing like this, Monty. If you say, well, they were a fantastic team, but they weren't the best team of all time. They go, wow, always bashing on them. How do you always dissing them in that way? It's like, really, mate? I'm not sure if that's entirely dissing. It's like I always say on my lists whenever I do one of those lists where it's like top 10 so-and-so, and someone's like, wow, you must really hate that guy to have him number 9. And I'm like, yeah, I really hate him. That's why I'm saying he's the 9th best player of all time. Fuck me, I must have some real axe to grind with this guy. 9th best player to ever play a game with 30 million people. Wow. Fuck that guy, right? You know, like, come on, guys, calm down. Let's get it in perspective for a minute here. Okay, so overall, most improved team of the year, who would you pick? Because here's the thing. I think for this one,
say Fnatic again.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is that normally most improved, you want it to be like a team who gradually got better over the year. So, but since Fnatic didn't really start with any core, they just had Yellow Star basically. They did start with 4 rookies and go all the way to being a very good team.
Well, not 4 rookies, but 4 new players. Rainover was not a rookie.
He was a rookie in the European LCS. Monty,
Stop it, you motherfucker.
I've gone full lolly spots there, Monty. They took 4 people who'd never even played League of Legends off the street, Yellow Star and Daylor mind melded with them and transferred to, it was like the Matrix. They were like, now I know how to play League of Legends. And then they started playing and they were amazing. Well,
also, you have to really credit Fnatic for not only taking these new players, 2 rookie players in Febivin and Huni, and sticking with them and developing them throughout the entire year, but making a very good roster move at midseason, which is tough to do because a lot of players are difficult to acquire for teams because they're locked up in contracts, but they made a major upgrade at AD carry and then had a perfect season. So in terms of most improved team, that's probably up there.
That's true. They also would match in that sense as well because they went from the Steelback lineup to the other lineup as well.
Yeah, I think another one you could take is KT. They made not even an adjustment between seasons, but an adjustment halfway through the summer season with Peekaboo and changed basically a team that was a little over 50% into the second best team in Korea in the summer season. So that was impressive also.
Yeah, I think those are fair. Okay, so we're on to the players now. So Korean Player of the Year. Who do you nominate?
This is a really interesting discussion, actually, because a lot of people, I think, aren't going to consider the entire year when we have this particular discussion, because it's easy to take a look and say, okay, well, SK Telecom won both seasons, but you have to ask yourself, how did SK Telecom win both seasons this year? And like, Faker really wasn't that great in spring. I actually think Faker had one of his worst seasons ever in spring, and he wasn't very inspiring. And also, if we were talking about Marin had a very good tournament at Worlds, but he wasn't spectacular the rest of the year. He had some good games throughout spring and summer. So actually, I'm going to surprise people, and I'm going to say that Gorilla is the Korean Player of the Year.
I mean, you can't really find a period of time where he was bad.
That's exactly it. And when we talk about the KOO Tigers, and we discussed their playstyle a little bit earlier, and they did have that weakness in the early game, he was actually a lot of the reason why they were still in games, because he would actually just leave Prey in the bottom and he would walk into top lane and gank for Smeb. And he has been very consistent as a support player over the course of the entire year, and a major contributor to their win streaks. And people, the KOO Tigers were a very streaky team, and people had hot streaks on an individual level as well. Prey was very good, then Prey was pretty bad, then he got good again towards the end, so he was pretty inconsistent on the whole. Smeb is a great player, but he has a tendency to overcommit and die in lane. We saw that a lot at the World Championships, and he couldn't carry the team a lot of the time, especially in the spring. They were more reliant on Prey for that. And Kuro also, yes, he was great on Victor, but he was he was above average on other picks, but Kuro had an outstanding Worlds performance. But before that, I was actually surprised that Kuro played as well as he did at the World Championship. So in my mind, the KOO Tigers, yes, they never won the whole season. They only got second and third place. Yes, they were embarrassed at IEM Katowice. but they made it back for the World Championship. But the one thing I think that was a consistent upside throughout the entire year to their success was Gorilla.
And obviously, as a player, candidate for best player at his position of the year, certainly. Fantastic throughout the whole year. His team still had very good success. It's not like he had the most stacked team, certainly. And on top of that, you have to throw in champion pool, fantastic at all points of the year.
Right, and just really good statistics too. And he's a player that had stats that most people don't consider. For example, he had the highest wards per minute of any support player at Worlds. He was doing the bulk of vision work for his team because he was basically compensating for an underperforming jungler.
I think actually in that sense, Gorilla kind of won this category just by his roster move decision, because all the other players who were the best at these sorts of positions were the ones who bolted for China last year, and he was, if you remember, the one lone person along with Faker who really stayed, who was like an elite level talent, and it obviously worked out for him because he's on a Korean team, and jungler and support are the positions which had the most variability if you went to a foreign team, it seemed, if you were a Korean. So he got to stay with the Korean team the whole time and stayed as a fantastic player, never had to drop off or relearn anything, just was fantastic, even more so than last year.
So you agree with me? You're not going to make any arguments for any other players?
Here's the thing. I think you can make an argument for Faker. Like, I think when you're characterizing like that...
I mean, he was great in summer. Don't get me wrong. Like, Faker was amazing. He played very well at the World Championship. He was there's a lot to be said for Faker. He was the only player who played Ryze at Worlds, despite the fact that we since know that Ryze is a very powerful pick. It's just no one else could play Ryze properly, right?
I mean, over the year, impressive. His champion pool was bonkers.
Right. And especially in summer, right? Especially in summer. His spring performance, didn't play very well in spring on the whole. That's why Easy Hoon was playing a lot of those games. Interestingly, the player that I would have for runner-up is Bengi, who actually was very consistent over the course of the year, while Marin and Faker did have their kind of up and down moments. Bengi was really good the entire time and a very solid jungler, and the best jungler in Korea for sure.
So here's the thing, though. The thing that I think is the biggest disqualifying factor for Faker versus Gorilla is that good old Coma ensured he couldn't have a chance to win Player of the Year Monty by not letting him play all the games. So there you go. So Gorilla played a lot more games, was overall better, but good old Coma didn't even let him in when they were beating absolutely every single team, and he could have just put a massive streak together. So thanks to Coma, the only person in the world who can stop Faker. He is the Faker stopper. No one else can defeat Faker except Coma. So, well done. You win, Coma. So, yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think for runner-up, though, I think you could definitely debate Faker there. He was absolutely unreal in the summer. I mean, he was untouchable in summer.
Yes. But it's not the whole year again, right? And I think
I'd like to be Bengi and play between Faker and Marin, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty nice, right? It's pretty nice. Exactly. Which lane do I go to? Spoiler, Bengi, there's no wrong answer. Just don't go bot lane.
And before people, flip their shit or anything like that, we actually did give it to Dade last year, even though Dade was eliminated in the semifinals of the World Championship, simply because Blue had an incredibly dominant run if you look at 2014 as a whole, and Dade was a major reason behind that. So yep. You have to. It takes more, right? So I think that Coup, they never got their first place finish, but they were relevant and powerful because of Gorilla the entire time.
So okay, here's the question then: who is the most improved Korean player? I think there's a bunch of ways you can go with that one.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually.
I mean, surely Marin's a nomination for that.
Yeah, Marin for sure.
Smeb. It's got to be another one, right?
Smeb,
when you consider he was nothing coming into this year.
I think Smeb has to win it because he was crap, and he became very, very good. One of the best top laners in the world after coming off a year that, I mean, when they announced him for that roster, I was confused as hell.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. By the way, just as another point as well, I've just realised we have to mention this, so I'll say it right now. I'm assuming, even though it doesn't really make that much sense, that we're just going to really be talking about regions when we say this, right? Like, for example, we can't count Huni as Korean in this. He'd be in the EU one, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Just because it makes it too complicated if you do that way. Okay, so now we'll do Chinese Player of the Year, but as I just mentioned, obviously Koreans can be mentioned in it. So who would the Chinese Player of the Year be?
I think you take Clear Love here.
Why do you do that?
First off, he had an extraordinarily good spring season, and even as Pawn had health issues in the summer season, he remained kind of the rock that EDG had as our top team from China. And I think he really upped his game. And I'm a famous down player. Well, not down player, but I haven't seen the same hype around Clear Love previously. But his play, especially in spring, was outstanding. And I think he did have a period of time, especially in spring, where he was one of the best, if not the best jungler in the world. So, and even as EDG sort of failed in the summer, I think he still deserves it. I think he still deserves it.
The biggest problem with this category is that Clear Love has it from like a gorilla type perspective of consistency over the year and relative to his world position. But anyone else you name had like slump periods. Like
Deft had a bad slump.
Deft obviously had his difficulties, despite the fact that he was very good.
Rookie and especially Godv's Worlds performances were.
I mean, I do think one that people went overboard with assigning team failure to is Imp. I thought Imp was pretty good for most of the year.
Yes, that's
true. I don't think
true.
he was ever bad, put it that way. He maybe had to adapt to the team initially. Put it this way, it took him longer to adapt to LGD than it did Deft to EDG, but he was also very good over the year. So, in fact, I think runner-up should be Imp for that. Runner-up for Chinese Player of the Year. I think that's fair. Very good, even towards the end when they all went to shit. He was still pretty good. I have to say, though, Monty, you do realise there is a Clear Love curse, though, which is Clear Love always finishes in the round of 8 of Worlds.
Interesting. I hadn't considered that.
Happened 3 out of 4 years, the 3 years he went. Finished in the round of 8 every time, even though every time his team came in as a potential favourite. There we go. That's because outside of LPL, they have junglers. So no, that's just there to trigger all the people who love Clear Love. So yeah, fair enough, he was a very good jungler this year when everyone else went to shit. So okay, most improved Chinese player. I feel like there's a few people could be on this one. Most improved, obviously again, Chinese region player. Really? Okay.
Yeah, because I think Clear Love was not a good jungler. I think he just farmed and didn't actually do anything previously. So I think that he would actually, I don't know if we'd give it to him, but he's definitely a contender.
A nominee, yeah. Who else could be up there? I mean, I'm trying to think. So, okay, here's one that I'm not sure if people will agree with my rationale for this, but I actually think a nominee for this should actually be Acorn, because he actually inverted his playing style, started playing carry champions, and up until Worlds was really good. He was really good the whole year long, and because he was over in LPL, most people didn't include him in that whole discussion of who is the best top laner. It was always like, Marin, Smeb, Duke, someday, Huni, but it was so rare I ever saw Acorn put into that list. He was absolutely fantastic for most of the year, and like I say, he was a very different player when he's on Samsung. On Samsung Blue, he was the guy who played fucking Lulu and stuff like that, or just the tank tops. So to be able to literally improve that other side of his game was very impressive to me, actually. It won a lot of respect from me. But this way, you notice you never... Here's a good example, Monty, of where people will characterize things in a ridiculously exaggerated way. So if I'm a massive Flame fanboy and I just say he's the best all time, where are all the episodes of me saying, Acorn should be taken out of the lineup, Flame should be inserted? Never happened, because actually LGD was a better team when Acorn played with them up to Worlds.
Also, I think you can make that argument because sure, Acorn started as a player who is one of the original innovators of the teleport in the top lane and of the proper way to lane swap as a top laner, right? But in this particular year, even though LGD failed at Worlds and failed at IEM, they were the ones who were playing the most effectively around double teleport, and they were the ones who sort of brought it into the metagame. It was Wayless, Godv, whatever you want to call him, and Acorn that were communicating well together somehow in different languages about when to teleport and how to sync up those summoner spells and give them all that map pressure. So they were the ones who brought that into the meta, and a lot of that's due to Acorn. So.
Let me think. Was there anyone else who should really on here? I don't really think so. I actually feel like China was a bit underwhelming in that respect, actually. Partly because what happened is because they bought so much Korean talent, and particularly at carry roles, it tended to be that most of those Korean talents were a little bit underwhelming. Some were good, and then it actually sadly did stunt the growth of Chinese players. So it's not like there was some Chinese rookie that came out and was absolutely fantastic. Like, Michael was good, but I don't think you can really put him past some of these names we're mentioning at the moment in terms of improvement. So it's hard on this one. I think that having too much talent in a way in the region stulted the growth of some of the other people who would have been there. I mean, no, wait a second. Let me think. Who could be in there? Improved player. I don't think it would be ridiculous to put someone like, I guess it's for the whole year though. I was going to say to put TNT in, but he only really played this summer, didn't he? Because he was in LSPL before.
Yeah, and also his summer performance wasn't amazing, so.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one. Okay, so EU Player of the Year. Who is the EU Player of the Year for the whole year? So this is where I feel like the bias of people forget. This is where I feel like the way Worlds ended and the way Summer was at times is going to make people turn it off. But I think I would probably just have to give it to Hooney for the whole year.
I don't like that.
Who else is going to get it, though?
Febivin.
What the fuck did he do in the spring? Because remember, spring was Forgiven. It was Forgiven and Hooney in the spring. Then in the summer, admittedly, Hooney wasn't as good, but he was still pretty good.
Yeah, but Hooney's performance at Worlds left a lot to be desired. And Febivin was solid in the spring season.
Sure.
He just had a much smaller champion pool.
See, this is where, by the way, we're actually looking at players and using region, but I can already tell you that we've already tilted every EU fanboy because they're all like, well, it's obvious, Yellow Star. You know, Yellow Star does absolutely everything, right? He shot calls, he actually invented Fnatic, he actually created how to teleport, and like they think the guy did everything, right? So he's a brilliant captain. Yeah, he's absolutely wicked. This is a player category, motherfucker. It's not about like inspirational speeches. He didn't go into the locker room. You don't get to be player of the year based on like, guys, I might not get there with you, but I'd just like to say it was an honor to serve with every single goddamn one of you. And they're like, Captain, my captain.
Also, Yellow Star's laning left a lot to be desired throughout the whole year. So
yeah, for sure.
I mean, he's certainly a good player. The problem is that we can't even clearly point to a number 2 EU team because Origin only existed in the LCS in the second half of the year.
And SK went to shit in the playoffs.
And SK went to shit and then got relegated because they decided to cut their star player for some reason.
See, here's the thing.
I don't consider Unicorns of Love a real League of Legends team, so.
So you think Febivin should get it over Hooney for EU Player of the Year?
It's a tough call for sure, right? It is definitely a tough call, but I think that Febivin ended up being a more solid player than Hooney, had a more solid mentality. He didn't have the same inconsistencies that Hooney did when it came to performance internationally. I think that Hooney had a major meltdown at the World Championship against the Coup Tigers that showed a lot of his flaws. And Febivin, I think, matched up much better against international mid laners than Hooney did against international top laners.
Okay. So, who was the most improved EU player? So the problem is we can probably cheat again and say Febivin.
Febivin.
Right?
And also, who's Rookie of the Year for EU? Febivin. You know what I mean? Like, I think he actually takes all of those categories because he had massive improvement from his relatively small champion pool into, admittedly, like we said earlier, having the freedom to take a lot of these Victor and Azir picks due to the bans against Huni. But he really, I think, shown as a player, he surpassed the expectations at MSI, especially up against Faker. That was very impressive, the way he played. I think in terms of improvement, it's hard to point to a player that didn't improve more than Febiven did, because Huni, I think, started out as a higher level and just improved less over time.
And obviously, Febiven came in with the rightfully earned choker label on him because of his past inability to qualify for LCS, and then actually became one of the more clutch players in EU. So, again, when you can actually develop a weakness into a strength, that obviously deserves credit. I think someone else, let me think, for most improved. See, here's one that might surprise you. I think someone else that I would nominate for most improved EU player would probably be Kasing, when you look at the way the whole year went.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think, and especially because every time he would switch rosters, that team would get noticeably and immediately better.
So, okay. North American Player of the Year. Is it Bjergsen?
I think it's Bjergsen. Still an international threat. Did win IEM Katowice. Did perform very well at IEM.
Still even had games in their terrible summer season when they ended up 5th place or something at the end of the regular part. He still had games where he was carrying.
I mean, at that point, his side lanes had totally gone to shit, right? Dyrus was in a meta where top lane had to carry, and Wild Turtle was Wild Turtle, so they really didn't have many threats there to back up Bjergsen. Santorin was doing nothing besides farming, so...
Like with Bjergsen, the only thing you'll ever find me critiquing over the year is the champion pool at MSI made no sense to me when you consider style of players. Yeah.
And then shot calling draft issues, right?
Sure.
Right, it wasn't
and then shot calling disappeared in the summer. At no point was his play ever a problem. Even when they were doing badly, I never thought, well, he's a bad player, he's gone off his boil. He's still a very good player.
Yeah, he needs to have the burden of shot calling lifted from his shoulders, which hopefully has happened with the addition of Yellowstar to the TSM roster, so Bjergsen can just focus on being Bjergsen instead of trying to carry the team in shot calling and carry the team as a star player.
So runner-up NA of the year, Doublelift?
Yeah. I think Doublelift had a very solid year, particularly the summer season. His stats were pretty insane, and he won with CLG, and he played very well. I think summer 2015 Doublelift was actually, I think that was one of the best seasons he's ever had in a long career. So he was outstanding, I think.
And as we always mentioned when we did our By the Numbers show, he's one of the only players who, in terms of stats, would put up crazy fantasy stats even in losses.
Yes.
Basically always did work in terms of numbers.
Yes, he did. His KDA was always good. He was always the one picking up kills and farm.
Okay, so let me see. Most improved NA player of the year. I feel like this is one where we should have some interesting candidates. Most improved NA player of the year. Who could we pick? Because here's the thing. I feel like for this one, Rush can't count, since it's not like we knew what he was before, and he was a solo queue talent. He came in and he was just very good. So I feel like he didn't necessarily show some massive growth.
I think he did. I think he actually started out in the spring pretty wild. And he's still a pretty loose cannon. He's a very good mechanical player, but his decision making isn't top tier, and he does force whatever team he's on to play around him. You basically have to just all in on his dives and the way he plays and the way he invades, which can be a problem, like we saw from Cloud9 at the most recent IEM. And I think he did improve in terms of his judgments. So, I think you can make a case there.
Who else would there be for this category?
I think Aframu might be another one. He actually showed up much better in the playoffs, especially in summer, than he ever has before, despite a player that, under pressure situations, had underperformed previously, or hadn't been able to keep up his form for the duration of his season, would always start strong and then run out of gas about halfway through the season.
Yeah, that might be it. Right, so the next one is players, but we did it by East and West for each position. So now we're combining. So who was the Eastern top laner of the year?
This is tough because
This, by the way, I'll just say this right now. For this particular category, I think this was one of the most stacked roles of the entire year. There was mainly because eventually we went into a top lane meta. There was some incredible Eastern top laners. If we look at the whole year, I mean, if I'll start listing off names now, I could go like 8 deep.
Sure, and because it changed so much too. Because, for example, in Korea, Duke was the MVP, even though he was on Najin, which wasn't very good in the spring season. He was the one who was reliably carrying that team to victory. We've got Smeb, who is very good at certain points. We have Marin, who is great at certain points. We have Someday, who is the MVP of the summer season, who played like 13 different champions over the course of summer in Korea. Acorn was obviously great for a lot of that time.
Koro won.
Well, I think he fell off quite a bit in summer.
First half of the year was pretty good.
He was very good.
Let me think. Is that everyone?
So
that's a pretty good list right there.
It's a great list, and it's hard to pick one player because Marin is a very good player, but Marin was less instrumental to his team's success than a player like Someday or Smeb or Duke.
See, that's the problem. To me, that's why I actually think Smeb wins this, because he's got the mixture of star player in his team. He's also a shot caller, but I actually don't count that. I like I've said in the past, we don't give that massive amounts of credit here because people go too far on that. Star player, his team also had the results to back it up, consistency over the year, very good at adapting to different champion pools. I think overall, I can just edge it to him, I think.
Yeah.
You can make a case for 3 or 4 of them, but again,
that's a
tough one.
That's a hard one, though. That's really hard, actually.
Especially because the hardest thing is, if you notice in all these categories, there are so many people who were really good in either spring or summer, but shit in the other one, and then you notice the one that's hardest for is if they were really good in spring and then it was summer that they did badly, because then it kind of like clouds your vision of him. Like you think back and you go, oh, he wasn't. I go, oh, but yeah, he was kind of, and so it's hard to think past that. So for top lane especially, that's why people like Koro One and Acorn, people are just going to immediately dismiss them out of hand because like they were so bad at the end. But
I think you're right about Smeb. I think he had a more consistent year. Certainly Marin turned in performances, but I think it's important to remember that Marin was playing mostly Maokai in spring, and
it's like I said, Monty.
And Smeb always had a deeper champion pool. We don't see Marin on champions like Riven and having those pentakill performances.
It's like I said to you actually in a past episode of Summoning Insight. If Marin was what LOL Esports tried to paint him at the end of the year, he was the real star of that team and the real best player in the world. How the fuck does someone get Maokai 25 times and go 24-1 on it? That won't happen if you're the best player in the whole world, mate. That happens when you play on the best team in the world and have the best player of all time in the team in the world. Like when you have all these factors, you can get a pick onto you like that. Let's see Smeb have a champion where he wins 24 out of 25 games and people give it to him.
Also no Riven, and Riven was a major pick at the end of summer and heading into the World Championships, and we saw people like Huni and Smeb and Someday play great Riven. So a lot of it comes down to Marin's a great player, but he just doesn't have the versatility and champion pool that some of these other players have.
So, okay. What about Western top laner of the year?
Huni. Is there even another choice? Like, Huni was the one who did the best at international competition and was a major carry threat and absorbed a ridiculous amount of bans.
No, I think for this particular category, he won that one pretty easily. I mean, that's why, to me, when Huni was in spring, he was just a monster. Because the gap... Here's the difference. Febevan was playing in Europe, so there were fantastic mid laners. The gap between Huni and the tops in Europe, for at least the first few months, was nuts. That's why he could just go balls deep at the first, 6 levels every single time, it felt like, and do some shit, you know. So, yeah, I think he wins that one. Eastern Jungler of the Year. Now, here's the thing, Monty. Now I'm making you take Clearlove, put him next to Chaser, put him next to Bengi. How does that work?
I think it's either Clear Love or Bengi, but like I said, Bengi for me is actually the runner-up player of the year. I think that if we look at the entire year and what Bengi did for the team, it would be Gorilla and then Bengi for me for overall player of the year, or so for Korea. So I think because Bengi had a more stable run and had more championships and obviously won Worlds than Clear Love, I would take Bengi here, even though he didn't have the same high as Clear Love in the spring season. He also didn't have the lows that Clear Love had later on.
I will point this out though, Monty. If you think of the whole year, Bengi actually wasn't that good at the very beginning with SKT. He was one of the guys where the Cinder Hulk really kicked him in. Because it was when he would pick shit like Nunu that he became super good.
I don't know about that, because even he didn't hit the same lows that a jungler like Hojin did during Cinder Hulk. So I don't think he was that terrible during Cinder Hulk.
No, I mean, I think that helped him.
Yeah.
I think that
what's
that
weird is right after
rise.
Cinder Hulk, he wasn't even playing in the finals. They played Tom and Easy Hoon, right? Yep. So he wasn't even playing in the spring finals. But he also, I think he also saved some other best of fives where he came in after Tom didn't do well to start things off. So I think Bengi, I mean, famously came in during that CJ best of five and played Rek'Sai for the first time ever and came back and won 3-0, right? So,
and obviously we would be remiss
if
we didn't mention
won 3 games in that best of five.
The fifth game against Fnatic in the MSI.
Yes, where he destroyed them with Nunu.
Yep. Good game, right?
I think you take Bengi.
A lot of fun, that game. That was one of your most satisfying games of the year, right, Monty?
I loved that game, actually. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah. So, okay. What about Western Jungler of the Year? So this one's a bit trickier, I think. Because here's the problem. Purely positionally, I feel like Rush has to be a candidate.
Yes.
But obviously Reignover has all the accomplishments. How do you weigh that up?
But see, the thing about Reignover is you have to consider his teammates, right? Reignover by the time we roll around to the summer season, Reignover's probably the worst player on Fnatic.
Sure, I don't think that's even that debatable.
So I think he was a massive beneficiary of the quality of his teammates more than anything else. And I think that I was really mad that Santorin got rookie of the spring split instead of Rush, because I think Rush, even though he didn't play that well at the beginning, was the main reason his team was
a hard carry, right?
He was carrying at the end. And then we had that playoff run where he inexplicably played Nunu, even though that's counterintuitive for his style.
And then obviously in summer he didn't have a mid laner, so
yeah.
What do you want? Oh, I forgot also, for Eastern Jungler, just as a nominee, we should have mentioned Spirit.
Oh, absolutely.
For the first split, he was a monster, much as we're talking about Rush here.
He did fall off towards the end, but I think that's just because he lost motivation playing with a really terrible team.
But yeah, for similar reasons, I think Rush, when you consider what he was working with, was unreal as a jungler in the West.
And yeah, I mean, you could see his the proof in his mechanics too, with his solo queue rating in Korea, which is outstanding for a jungler in solo queue. I mean, obviously we're not counting solo queue here, but you can see that's a very mechanical thing to do to get that high in solo queue, and he did it. I mean, as we are talking right now, he's number 4 on the Korean solo queue ladder.
So okay, Eastern mid laner of the year. You got to give this one to Faker, surely.
It's just Faker didn't have a great spring season. That's the thing that's holding him back.
Okay, but who's the nominee that's going up against him for this one?
Rookie.
And he had a better year than Faker. Faker was the best player in the world at one point in time.
Yeah, that's true. I think Faker did do exceptionally well in summer, and then didn't do so well in spring. But Rookie also didn't. I think he performed okay at Worlds.
He was all right. He also had literally the jungler he'd played with. Again, he also had like a help in that sense. He had a good team around him in that respect.
Definitely.
What about the Western mid laner of the year? Because the problem now, it's Featherton versus Bjergsen, right? So how do you resolve that problem? That
I think it's Bjergsen.
Bjergsen was the hard carry.
I still think it's Bjergsen. He was the hard carry. He did have more success in spring, and even though Featherton was great and improved a lot, I think he's still not quite as versatile as Bjergsen is.
And also, as was noted, Featherton didn't have to win lane most of the time in the game. That wasn't even his job. He didn't have to do that. His team was so fantastic. Whereas if Bjergsen gets wrecked in lane and some of his other players aren't playing, how the fuck is he supposed to win that game? Because remember, he's not some like yellow star type shot caller who's just going to shot call him from behind. Like, it's not going to happen, is it? So he basically had to shot call and win lane and then win the game and then be the hard carry. So if you do that, you might not win the championship, but you get to get the fucking Player of the Year award, believe it or not. You at least get that, don't you? You don't get that taken away from you and given to the guy who just was on a sick team. So there you go, Bjergsen, as a trophy. It's not, you don't even actually get a trophy, it's imaginary. But
yeah, we're not rich enough to make trophies yet, unfortunately.
One day, maybe. I don't know the money. We're going to have to be really rich before I'm going to waste any amount of money on trophies for League of Legends. But I can't lie to you, mate. Here's the thing.
I like how you just slip in for League of Legends players. You definitely wasted on CSGO players, wouldn't you?
It's a great game. They deserve it. I mean, they're fantastic players who've shown a lot of heart, guts, and dedication. So I'd be happy to pay for trophies for them. So, okay. Let me see. Eastern AD Carry of the Year. This is a tough one, right? See, I'm feeling Imp for this one, for the whole year.
Ooh, I don't know. Bang was fantastic. I don't think you can. Bang is underrated a lot of the time, I feel, and he really did have a very good year on the whole.
That must be nice to play with a nominee for the other two carry roles we said, Monty. You know, just saying.
I think you're right. All right. I think you're right. I think Imp did have a very good year, and Imp was really, even when LGD was in their shittiest moments, Imp was still the one who was showing up more so than anyone else on his team.
Western AD Carry of the Year. Now here's what's interesting, Monty. It is the whole year, and there weren't really that many spectacular AD carries, and we all know we're not giving it to Reckless. So this is where I feel like we get to have our little bias and say, you know what, Forgiven, you win the AD Carry of the Year, mate.
No.
Why not? Who's a better Western AD carry than him?
Double Lift would be the other argument, right?
Okay, that's one you could put there, sure.
But I think Forgiven carrying that SK roster with N-rated and Fox to the number one position in EU and looking very dangerous up until they went up against a much deeper Fnatic roster. They did fall apart at the end after the Coup Tigers kind of exposed them, but Forgiven didn't have strong other players on his team. He didn't have strong teammates in either season, right? In either split.
And they did win 15 out of 18 games.
He actually did turn around Gambit at the end, too.
I mean, I'll give you that Double Lift had consistency, sure. But I think that spring split from Forgiven was pretty good. Admittedly, he didn't win at the end. Fair enough. But then again, at the end, people realised, oh, wait, he is the team. So ban him out completely and dive him all the time. I mean, I'd like to see a lot of the other nominees in these lists if that's what happened to them. I mean, mate, you know the old joke, Monty, about an AD carry is that AD carry is one of the only positions you don't waste all your time banning out all their champions because they only used to play a champion, put on like 3 champions each anyway. So you used to go, right, give him whatever he wants, just ban out the really dangerous mid laner and the jungler or whatever, you know. They literally could just go, now let's waste all our bans on the fucking AD carry and first pick away his AD carry. That's how good you are. That's almost like every other team just told us he's the best AD carry, like right there.
That's true. So I think you're right. I think we give it to Forgiven, and with the follow-up, the runner-up being to Double Lift.
Okay. So I feel like we already know this first one, which is Eastern Support of the Year. If the Korean Player of the Year is Gorilla, I feel like he has to win Eastern Support of the Year just to be logically consistent there, Monty.
Agreed.
What, though, about Western Support Player of the Year? This might be your time to ingratiate yourself with the Fnatic fans. You know, maybe we can now pick him.
I really wish Mithy had played in the spring in LCS.
He would be a candidate for sure.
Absolutely. I think Mithy, if we were just considering Summer and Worlds, I think you definitely give it to Miffy. But since we do have to actually consider the entire year, and unfortunately that just disqualifies a lot of the Origin players.
Yellow Star it is.
Yellow Star it is.
Okay, there we go, Fnatic. You got one in the end, mate. You got Huni and Yellow Star there. Right, so here's a question for you. Over the whole year, who was the most improved Eastern player? Smeb?
Yeah. Smeb is really just this insane fringe case where he was one of the very worst top laners out of 16 in Korea for a very long time on Incredible Miracle, and then suddenly got super good.
What about most improved Westerner? I mean, to be fair, we had almost no one from NA, so I guess you mean that's just going to be Febiven?
I think it's Febiven again.
Right? Yeah, Febiven, okay.
He really did have a very strong development over the course of the entire year. And it was clear, too, how much better he was getting over time.
So here's the problem. I've noticed that actually the way that Season 5 went has fucked up lots of our categories. Because in the past, when you did Rookie of the Year and Most Improved, they would be different. But Most Improved and Rookie of the Year are going to be basically the same for East and West. It's going to be Febiven and Smeb again. Oh no, wait a second. If we're going to be pure Rookie, then maybe they have to be someone who's never played in the league before.
Of course, yes. Smeb can't be a rookie.
So Febiven can have that one now. So who would have it for...
Febiven is definitely, I think, the Rookie of the Year, with a special shout out to Niels, who was amazing right off the bat with Origin, right? What a fantastic run this guy had. He started in the summer season, and then he found himself doing extremely well and ending up in the semifinals of the World Championship, and he played so well the entire time.
So then who is the Eastern Rookie of the Year?
I want to say Mako.
Okay.
I think Mako came out very strong on EDG, capped off his spring season with a win at MSI and playing extremely well on engaged supports. So yeah, I think Mako here is probably going to be the overall Eastern rookie that we have to consider, because even though the Korean players in the Korean scene, we had a lot of players that improved massively, players like Smeb and Marin. There wasn't really a rookie player this year that I think was at the same level, because the thing about Korea is rookie players may play 1 or 2 games and then not get some play for a while and then suddenly come out as a starter much later on, and they're technically not rookies, because Peekaboo, for instance, would be a strong candidate, but he had previously played on Zenix Storm, right? So he had
even played like 1 game or so for SKT at the beginning of 2014, right?
Yeah. Well, no, he wasn't on the team at that point in time.
No. Wasn't that? Didn't he play some games in Masters or something when Pumandu was out?
No.
Remember?
No.
I'm pretty sure Pumandu didn't play all the games.
No, that was Casper.
Oh, Casper, that's right. Yeah, I've mixed them up there.
So who is now Wraith on Samsung?
Fair enough. Yeah, you got me on that one.
So Korea, the thing with Korea is it's very rare for a team to actually full-time start a real rookie player, because they have such deep benches that they'll just throw them in, sub them in for a few games and then leave them out. Or Korea, the players have taken a really long time to develop to the top level. So I don't feel like we really had, if we look at true rookies like Tom, I mean, sure, he did well, but he got actually cut by SKT now, did well in spring, but never really grew, I think, as a player. You can't really point to a rookie player on any of the top teams.
Yeah, well, the big problem is obviously China bought all the talent, so they had almost no rookies, and then Korea had to consolidate all their talent, and then there wasn't much space for brand new people to come through. So if you notice, most of the best players in Korea were people who already were in Korea. They just they then had a space to grow into. They had a vacuum to fill and become the best. So yeah, it's true there weren't many Eastern rookies in that sense. Right, we've already gone over this, and again, there's obviously no surprise where if Gorilla wins Korean Player of the Year, odds are he is the Player of the Year. So yes. He is the Player of the Year, right, Monty?
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Again, Gorilla just had an outstanding year on the whole. Consistently underrated. Definitely the best support of this year. The reason why the Coup Tigers even made it through the early game a lot of the time. Such an incredible support player. Not on all esports top 20 players at Worlds. The jokes go on.
And the other thing you have to mention is, if you look at our track record, when we have been giving like best players, last year, okay, we gave Dade best player of the year, but I think our runner-up was Mata, actually. I think that's who we had as the runner-up of the year. And if you notice, that's a trend that Korea has over other regions, which is that in Korea, you can be the jungler and support and be the best player in the whole world, or one of them, Whereas you notice in general, it has been a trend in history that the other regions don't produce players at those positions who are just like god players, So it does say something about the Korean system.
So they just play better as a team, and when you play better as a team, it allows players who get vision or who make engages or who play the map better a chance to shine.
What do you think was the series of the year? Because obviously this is very different from last year, Monty, because now we had series play every week in LCK, whereas in the past we only used to have playoffs. So there's a lot to choose from, right?
Are we really going to pick, let's do best of 5 for that, okay?
Okay, so best of 5 of the year, what would that be?
Like playoff match or something like that, because I think that series is losing meaning in that context.
Okay.
There are some really good ones. First off, EDG versus LGD in the spring finals for China for LPL was great. There's also CJ versus SKT in the semifinals of spring.
Coup versus KT, semifinals.
Coup versus KT was a great one.
What was great about that one? Yeah.
MSI finals were really good.
Okay. Right, so let's run through a few of them then. So the first one you picked out there, LGD, EDG. What do you remember of this series? How would you characterize it?
I mean, this one was a little sloppy because I actually think LGD should have won this series. There were some Baron throws that happened but it was super exciting, very, very close series between two top-tier teams in China at the time. So that
the talent in that final series was unreal.
The individual play was nuts too.
That was extremely high-level match of players we're talking about here. Just extremely good players across almost all positions, except Schwen. He was trash. So that, in fact, in many ways, Monty, that's why the one that won was the one that didn't have a trash can as one of the 5 players, believe it or not. It's weird, the correlation there. Could be a coincidence, we don't know. So the CJ versus SKT series, obviously this one had a unique aspect to it, which was that CJ thought, well, let's not even play our best players to start this series, as only Coma apparently thinks in times. So they were actually down 2-1 when they had EasyHoon and Tom in, right? Was it Tom only played in one game, or did he play both with EasyHoon? I'm trying to remember the order it went in.
Tom played 2 games. EasyHoon played 1.
1, okay.
Because what happened was they subbed in Faker. Faker lost a game, and then they subbed in Bengi, and then Bengi won 3 games straight on Rek'Sai. So that was very exciting. And also, Game 4 is definitely one of the best games of the year, when Bang had that insane carry performance on Lucian, and Marin came in and saved the day with that teleport to the mid lane to prevent the victory going to CJ.
Yes,
I think the MSI finals are still my favorite. I really enjoyed the MSI finals.
MSI finals was very good.
I love the draft strategy. I love the fact that Faker's LeBlanc was defeated through the intelligent drafting that we saw from EDG. Just great adjustments from EDG in terms of their strategy. Really exciting back and forth games.
And obviously, if you want to talk about great excitement, for it to go to the 5th game, and we know China hasn't beaten Korea in a big final tech, big competition in years and years of the LCS era, and then Faker locks in the champion that he's undefeated on, literally never lost.
Great story.
That's like some movie level shit, and then you have the strategy to come up with it. So yeah, very good. And I actually, we referenced it already. I did think that the KT Coup series was a great series. That was like a real slugfest. It's like back and forth, game after game. If you remember, that was the one where people were playing. I mean, the number of AD carries that were played in that series, it was like all of them pretty much. Like Ashe, Kog'Maw, Vayne, Corky. Obviously, those are two good AD carries within the Korean region. It was back and forwards, great series. Two great top laners as well, obviously, who each got their chances to shine. And just to trigger people, Monty, it's hard to beat Korean leagues because they have a thing called blind pick, you see, when it's the 5th game. That kind of elevates the whole experience, you know? Basically, blind pick is like a plant that I know not many of you know enough about. It's called cannabis, and it actually enhances experiences. So whatever's already really good, like maybe music of Pink Floyd in the 1970s, you know, the movies of Stanley Kubrick, become enhanced when you add in this particular obscure, very, very unknown plant, actually, that has psychoactive effects on the human brain. So in that way, blind pick is like that, Monty. It takes what you've already experienced and enjoyed and know is good, and then it enhances it further with this extra quality. Because obviously in blind pick, you don't have a lot of the same problems of the side disadvantages and these sorts of things, right? And you get the accumulated aspect of, we've seen what picked and banned in the first 4 games. Now which coach can figure out what someone else will pick or what his best champion... That's always an interesting puzzle to figure out, right?
Sure, of course.
And as I seem to remember, in that particular blind pick was where... Wasn't that the one where the KT just someday just picked Lulu? Even though, in fact, no, both of them picked Lulu. Remember, it was the double Lulu game.
Yep.
I'll admit.
At that point in time, it was actually very rare for Korean teams to play top Lulu, which made that even more surprising, really.
So, okay, I'll admit that sort of sounded like I was making a point against my case for blind pick being really good. That it was a mirror match of a Lulu top lane.
You are
top lane for fuck's sake.
Lulu a hater.
It's dog shit, mate. That champion shouldn't even be in the game. That championship, if that champion is like steroids, that's the drug that's like, Monty. You just have that champion and it makes other champions better. That's what a pointless design that is. And Lulu's also a champion where you can nerf everything and it's still used. It's always worrying to me, mate, when things can go through nerf after nerf and it's still super good. And also can be flexed at like 3 different positions. So there's a problem with that sort of champion. So anyway, here's one that we have to do. Is there an individual game of the year that you can pick out? I mean, I've already said one that's pretty good. For SKT versus Fnatic, not in terms of excitement, but in terms of just crisp perfection, was an incredible game of the year, right?
Game 5 was fantastic. Like, I remember I was casting that series with Kobe, and Kobe was he was tilting so hard just watching Bengi's Nunu take apart Fnatic's jungle. It was very funny to be casting with him because you could just feel, as a jungler himself, the rage building that it was possible to do this.
There was nothing Fnatic could do after about 5 minutes in that game.
No, nothing. It was a complete choke out, basically. Got him in the stranglehold and never let go. So it was an impressive game, to say the least. I tweeted this the other day. My favorite game was the second meeting in the best of 3 between KT and KU in the regular season of summer in Korea, because to me that was such a high level game from both teams. First off, it starts out with KT playing this Juggernaut composition, and then KU executing a fast push with their team composition absolutely beautifully, and taking out all the towers and getting a major early game advantage. And then KT nearly losing the game. They give up 5th Dragon intentionally because they don't want to fight there. They think it's better to fight around the Baron. Then they have this incredible team fight where Arrow manages to survive with this Juggernaut when KU has 5 Dragon stacks up, and then they go and push in to win the game. I think it's hands down. Both teams play extraordinarily well. There's a huge comeback from KT. It's a really fucking good game.
Wasn't there another game that I think you might have forgotten now, Monty? I'm trying to jog your memory on this one. It was Jin Air versus someone. Might have been Jin Air SKT. Yeah. That was like 80 minutes long or something.
Yeah,
idiotic.
I like that one a lot. Yeah, that was.
Give us some details. That one.
It was Jin Air Najin, I believe, actually.
Okay, that could be.
It was just a very long strategic game where it was all based around poke and not engaging. And
wasn't it a poke comp and a disengaged comp?
Yes.
And they just danced around each other doing nothing for 80 minutes, which is obviously your version of like tantric sex at that point in time that you might like, but everyone else is like, do something, fucking do. I'm paying for this. This is my life running out, my motherfucker. Like, it was a great game for you, right, Monty?
It was great.
It was a great game. Let me just look here. I'm trying to find... I'm pretty sure there was a game... Okay, I've got one for you, Monty. This is for Thorin's version, okay? So much as you enjoy games where it's like very tactical, both teams play correctly, and each one, like at each phase, does the right thing, and then the other one counters with the right thing, Monty. One thing I like, you might not guess this, is I like to see really godlike players smashing in the skulls of little peasant motherfuckers who don't deserve to even be in their presence, and crushing them utterly to the detriment of an actual close game. So one of my favourites that I will pick out was in the spring playoffs when SKT played against CJ and Faker locked in LeBlanc and went 15-1-10 and just body slapped the shit out of CJ Enters. I really enjoyed that game. That was one of my games of the year.
Sure, and I think the LoL Esports list, even though I do think it was flawed, and I don't think you can put that Fnatic versus Unicorns of Love game at number one, that was a great game too, just in terms of excitement. Not to take away from it, I think it was one of the more exciting games played in the West, but it was also major flaws from Fnatic that prevented them from ending that game, but it was a good comeback from Unicorns of Love, for sure.
That should have been fun game of the year.
Yes, agreed.
Okay. What... There was actually also a game, let me think. Oh, fuck, I'd have to really jog my memory for this. But wasn't there a game, maybe you can remember this. There was a game, I think it was in the summer split that SKT played. And basically, SKT should have lost this game. Maybe this could have been CJ again. But this was in the actual regular part of the split. And Faker played Victor, and he just like hard carried the whole game and just like won whole team fights by himself and like... You couldn't do anything to him, basically. Because if you remember, that was when he was God mode on Victor.
Auto-attacking the second tower, yeah.
That was pretty nuts. Because the difference between that and the LeBlanc game I mentioned is the LeBlanc game, he was just shitting on them the whole game. This game was one where actually the other team was winning, and he just sort of went like, no, I think I'm going to win this game, actually. Like, oh, okay, sure thing, Faker, you win. Any Western games that we want to mention for this category, Monty? I mean, I guess technically Fnatic was in there. They were the punching bag. They were on part of knockout of the year. They were just the one getting knocked the fuck out. Was there any actual Western versus Western game that was very good?
Western versus Western. I was going to say the KT Origin game at Worlds, where Origin won, was a really good game. I thought both teams played very, very well, and Origin had that surprise Baron after they baited KT into the bottom lane, and KT overcommitted to the tier 2 turret and bottom. I thought that was probably my favorite game of the World Championship. And that ended with an Origin victory. I thought they played extremely well.
Okay, let's see if you can do this.
I also thought that the last game of the World Finals, Game 4, where Faker went absolutely nuts on Ryze, was incredibly impressive from SK Telecom, and that was some of the best play I've actually ever seen from Faker. His teleport use was incredible. His Ryze play was amazing.
It's because that was another example, Monty, of the build-up of the tension. It's because all tournament long he's been playing Ryze, but they just win before he has to do anything and never gets to the 40 minutes. And then finally, he actually gets to like unleash on Ryze and do something and just wreck him completely. And so it's a satisfying end. So what would you say was the play of the year? Is there one play that sticks out in your mind?
I think it was Marin's teleport into the mid lane in Game 4 versus CJ, which is another candidate for Game of the Year, the one where Bang went berserk, because that actually saved SKT's playoff run in itself, because otherwise that would have definitely won CJ the game. So in terms of a heads-up play, that was really amazing.
I mean, people might forget this, but the first game of, I think it was the summer, was that... No, wait a second, was it actually the spring? Do you remember the game where Faker got the penta on LeBlanc? Where it looked like he'd run out of time, he's Najin?
Yeah.
And if you remember, what was great about it was the 5th kill, Monty, because OQ went under his Nexus towers and was like, ha ha, I am laughing. And you know, it's a famous thing, Monty, in solo queue. If you ever like dare taunt Faker, there's like a million videos of him just mechanically bombing in, just wrecking someone's complete face and escaping with like 1 health and be like, get the fuck out of my... Don't you ever dare disrespect me. So like that, the same thing happened, if you remember. He just like maxed out all of the LeBlanc distortions in, killed him, and got a fucking penta as a result. Like, he could have gone to the fountain and denied him the penta. I've never actually told you this, Monty. But okay, something people don't know is that I've said this many times in CSGO, but in CSGO and in CS before that, there was a famous thing where, obviously, similar to a pentakill, people like to put up a clip where someone does a 1v5. They kill all 5 of the other players in CS. And I said to someone, there's a weird actual sort of switch that gets flipped in people's brains where when their first 4 teammates run in and die, they actually think to themselves, oh, but in that case, he must be low health, I'll run in and get him. But obviously, when you're on the other end of it, watching that guy's POV, you're like, great, come in. He's just going to get this 5th kill and complete this clip. Now, when I played, I know this would be hard for you to believe, but I used to be kind of an asshole because if my 4 teammates ran in and died, I would purposely run back, go through spawn, go to the other side of the map, take a really hard 1v1 versus a totally different player just to make sure that original player could never get the full 5-man versus my team, and I would never appear in a movie, Monty. I was never going to appear in it, and I would never give that player the boost, the morale of knowing he killed all 5. So likewise, OQ, you should have gone to the fountain, stood on the fountain, Faker would have never got the pentakill, it would have been a quadra kill only, and then you could have denied him a little bit, but instead you taunted him. You had to give him the chance, and he took it. So you've only got yourself to blame there, mate. Do as Thorin says, just try and, war of attrition, ruin everyone's game. If your game's been ruined, what are you going to do? Ruin his game. Maybe Riot Light was onto something, Monty. I don't know. Anyway, I think that's the end of our award show for this year. Okay, I've got one crazy question for you. I'll give you a challenge here, Monty. So you have to pick me one player who next year he wouldn't have been a nominee this year. You think next year this player could be on this list, like someone who there's massive upside for, or someone who's like was just a good player now, but you think there's like a level they're going to go to next year? Is there someone who's sticking out for you?
I don't know.
Wait a minute, I've just realised something. Fuck. We didn't mention for Eastern Mid of the Year, we should have definitely mentioned Coco, right?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, Coco was very good.
Because the reason I was thinking of that now is I think he's someone for next year has a chance to be Player of the Year. When you look at the team he's on. The potential's there, right?
Yeah,
now he's got the team around him where he's not in like Bjergsen mode where everyone else goes to shit. He's like, well, I guess it's me or nothing then. It's Coco or bust. Now he actually potentially could win everything if he rides the coattails of Blood Flame. So just slip something in there. That was in parentheses. So
yeah, I think Coco has a really good chance to do even better this year, like you're saying, with the new Incredible Miracle roster. Chaser is another one that I'm looking at. Obviously, the new IM roster, if they can work together, might be quite good.
I guess Duke then, by the same logic.
Yes, Duke, for sure.
Very individually good player. Now, in theory, on what was the best team. Is there any Westerners we should put in here?
Up-and-coming Western players. Adrian?
Adrian?
Yeah, for support. Might have a very good year.
Okay, thought you turned into Rocky for a second there.
Over on Immortals. Good job.
It's good, right? It's subtle. I think there's this brand new player from the CIS region called Alex Itch, who I think might be able to do all right, because I was told he's total shit. Like, I was told that he played in Challenger in EU, he failed, therefore he's actually a terrible player, should never play again. But I think he could maybe get some kills. So I think that's my hot tip. Watch out for him. He's on the rise. And also, he's going to have to hard carry that team, if I'm being honest. So yeah, he's got his work cut out for him on that one. So
thanks a lot.
Anyone else I could pick out? Let me think. I tell you what, I'll tell you one that might sound like a weird one, because obviously it's not someone who's like not a good player already, but if you are someone who ever believes a Western player can be the best player in the world, now I realise that might sound like a ridiculous statement, etc., but we haven't had that many teams in the past that really were that good at all the positions to build around Western players. Surely this next year has to be the time where if someone really believes Bjergsen can be as good as... Well, now he's got the team. He's never going to get a better team than this. He's never going to have better resources around him than this. Likewise, Forgiven on H2K. If these players are ever going to fulfill that potential, it's going to be this year. If not, then they're going to have to shut the fuck up and take their place at the back of the line while all the Koreans collect all the trophies again. Because this is the year.
Well, you say that, but like even this new TSM, I'm not sure is really going to be able to do a whole hell of a lot when it comes to the international scene, because it's not like last year where a lot of the Koreans, the famous Koreans, left. I mean, we had Koreans like Flame and Fly coming back this year. Coup Tigers adding Peanut. That's probably going to be an upgrade in the long term. We haven't had the same exodus from Korea, right? So...
Well, it's like I said in my piece I did, my column for Splice, that actually, if you think this last few years were bad, next year, no exaggeration, the top 4 teams in the world could all be Korean.
Yes, because they didn't lose. The top teams in Korea didn't really lose.
And China went to shit.
Okay, China went to shit. Marin left SKT, but they replaced him with Duke. Hey, that's not a downgrade. KT... sure, they lost Peekaboo, but they upgraded, I think, in the mid lane. And then Coup Tigers just straight upgraded, I think. Maybe not immediately, because Peanut's going to take some time, I think, to get used to the way the Tigers play. And likewise for the Tigers to him, because he's a much different style of jungler. But in the long haul, that's probably going to be really good for the Tigers.
Yeah, okay. I think that's the end of the show. So... this is a real category. I think that Fantasy Esports Site of the Year would go to... I think the main nominee would be Alpha Draft. Is there any other nominees? No, there's none actually that exists as far as I know factually. That's the only one that exists. So they win, and that's the end of the show.